We're here interviewing Dr.
Harter
of Activ Solar, COO of Activ Solar. We just toured Activ Solar's largest power plant the other day, the Solar Farm, 100 megawatts solar power capacity, 6th largest solar power plant in the world, and it was the largest when it was completed in 2011, correct?
2011.
Yeah, and they also have several other large-scale, utility-scale solar farms in Ukraine. But Activ Solar is Austrian-based, right?
Correct.
This is not on my list, but if you could say, how did it end up that an Austrian-based company has such a big presence in Ukraine?
That's an interesting story. The company was bought by our CEO in those days out of an Austrian conglomerate, and then it was used, and then we had the opportunity, or let me say the other way around. At that time, we were thinking of building up a polysilicon-based supply chain, because in those days, the silicon price was in the $400 per kilogram range, and there was a factory in Ukraine for sale. It was privatized out of a large state-run company, and they offered the silicon part for sale. And we entered in, Activ Solar entered into that deal together with other investors, and then the group provided the capital via bank loans to finance the reconstruction. The factory was reconstructed to state-of-the-art and started producing silicon. So that's how we came into Ukraine. And the second angle was then the Ukraine government decided to promote renewable energy by passing a so-called green tariff law,
which is a feed-in tariff,
which secured a feed-in tariff system, model similar to Germany at that time. Again, this was 2009, and which then provided an opportunity, besides having the silicon factory, to also produce solar parks. So this was the angle how we ended up in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's exciting to see because often we see the biggest countries in the world as the leaders, the largest power plants, like China, the U.S., Germany is up, but then it's like Ukraine, biggest solar power plant in the world. A little later, Ukraine, biggest solar power plant in the world, and it's very exciting, especially for me. I'm living in Poland currently, so it's right next door. So I'm excited to be in the region. So what inspired what actually inspired the founders of Activ Solar to jump into the solar business in the first place?
As I mentioned, the founding director was Kari Atefire, our still a current and actual CEO, and he was working in the banking industry before, and from that he already got a pretty good feeling what could be a next hot market to be in, and that's how we picked up renewable and especially solar.
Yeah, it's a great. I read and write about it every day. This is the future. This is the future of energy. This is the energy market is one of the largest in the world, but still a lot of people don't quite. Not everyone is great at seeing the future, and not everyone is great at knowing what's going to be the next big market. But obviously,
just as an anecdote, when I moved from my diploma thesis to my PhD, I did a PhD thesis on wedge solar cells. That was in 1975.
Very early on.
And this institute had a whole team focusing on renewable energy in various flavors, mostly centered around PV, but it was a semiconductor institute. And that was exactly what you said was discussed at those days already.
Yeah, I mean that's much earlier than me, but I remember going to some conferences in 2000, 2001, something like this, and everyone was like, solar is about to blow up, it's about to be big. And it took a little time. Well, it started happening in Germany, but it took longer than I thought from my impression at that conference. But yeah, I guess different people see it earlier and earlier, but now it's obviously growing to a tremendous speed. It's amazing to watch. Makes my job harder and harder every day because there's more and more big stories to cover.
Yes.
Can you say also? I'm very interested in actually how the economics are working for Activ Solar in Ukraine. Can you say what kind of ROI or return on investment Activ Solar gets on these solar projects?
No, unfortunately cannot. We have a company policy not to disclose those numbers. We are private owned.
Yeah, I figured that was good, but it's good.
It makes, let's put it this way, it makes sense, otherwise it wouldn't continue.
Yeah, it makes business sense. And you probably can also comment on whether or not you see much change in that arena in Ukraine. Like for example, in the U.S., we have this situation until 2016 is we have some tax credits for solar. So as the solar prices are dropping, and we still have these tax credits, it's it's considered to be more and more competitive. And then after 2016, we don't know what's going to happen. But at that point, pretty confident. The solar industry seems very confident that that there's not even going to be need for any kind of incentives.
That's the way where we have to go to. Now I can comment definitely on the regulatory framework in Ukraine, because we also saw some changes over last year and this year. In this year, April, the feed-in tariff was dropped by about 30%, also following a decline curve, and there will be more cuts already in the law, so everybody is aware of it. They also
could you actually say the exact schedule?
The big parks have been in the past receiving around 46 euro cents per kilowatt hour. It is now dropped to 34 euro cents per kilowatt hour. At the same time, the local content has been increased. It currently stands at 30% local content, starting in July this year, and it's going to move to 50% in July next year. So there are quite some regulatory changes which happen.
I think there's a third different number I've heard on that exact same thing, but I trust that you have the exact.
No, it was pretty complicated from starting from last year to for July this year, due to several changes. There was one change in January, another one in April, another one in July. I give you just the old one and the new one to make life simple.
Excellent. And is there like a point when that is supposed to be completely phased out? Is that scheduled in, or is that?
No, there are further reductions in the law already, assumed or not assumed, written, and the local content. I'm not aware of any changes from other than 30 to 50% in July next year. Then the feed-in tariff itself is only guaranteed up to 31st December of 2029.
Okay.
So it's different. It's not a rolling 20 years. It's a fixed date. So after that date, the current legislation does not provide any feed-in tariff anymore.
Interesting. And what is the situation now if you get a feed-in tariff? Is it set for 15 years, 20 years, or
no,
just
until this date? Yes.
So anyone, anytime in these series of years has it set until 2029.
Yes. So if you build,
so it makes a lot more sense to get in early.
Correct.
Yeah. So that might be one reason why Ukraine has been so fast.
Yes. Everybody is trying to get project finance to build, get plots, get pipeline to build.
Exactly. That's really interesting. I think that's the first time I've run across a feed-in tariff that was set up like that. Are you aware of other countries that have such a?
No, you have various systems.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anybody having a fixed end date. Yeah, Germany has a rolling one. That's for most countries which have a feed-in have a rolling.
Right.
So, but then they also have quotas. In several, like Italy always have quotas. You apply for those quotas. When they are full, you don't get any new park will have to wait for a new quota.
Right, we're seeing this in a lot of countries.
So this is there are various flavors of this feed-in tariff more than power purchase agreements.
So I really was not aware of that, and this is extremely interesting to me. So I'm going to ask you more about it. And so obviously, well, you can speak on the policy point without much reservation, I think. So what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of such a system with a fixed end date? Is it creating any problems that you see, or?
No, first you have to answer yourself, what the regulating body or the government wants to achieve.
Yes. And
all governments want to achieve the same. They want to make sure that renewable takes off, but eventually becomes self-sustaining.
Right.
Not having to need taxpayers' money or socializing the cost of renewable via feed-in tariff. So that's what every country wants.
Right.
Now there are several ways to do that, but this is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
So now, whether one scheme is better than the other one, nobody really knows. See, a year ago I was presenting at conferences that the EG in Germany, the renewable energy regulation in Germany, is considered one of the best in the world. Now, following the discussion which started last year in Germany and all the way through this year, everybody in Germany now feels it's the most stupid law the government ever put into place.
You have,
so,
it's a new industry, new new policy, and we're seeing a lot of learning along the way.
That's number one. Everybody learns, and the system is complex.
Yes.
How it interfaces with all the other industries, because for example in Germany, the renewable business is changing the business model of the big utility companies.
Yes.
And then the decision of the German government to phase out nuclear after the Fukushima disaster has compounded the issue and made it even more complex.
Yes, we focus a lot on Germany because it's so far ahead in terms of capacity and whatnot. And one interesting thing with the German situation, it seems for me in the media, a lot of overemphasis is put on people becoming dissatisfied with energy wind, because we've actually researched, and we have writers from Germany who have given us independent studies on this, and show that still there's overwhelming support among the general population for the energy wind, but there are definitely like you're saying, the utilities and people with immense amounts of money invested in previous models have realized that it's very, very much threatening to their business. So there's this higher tier of people who are working very hard to change the conversation and to slow the momentum that was created from that. And so I see it, unfortunately, a lot of big media that just regurgitates reports from think tanks that have a clear funding source. And I have seen that have an effect on the population of Germany, have a little bit, decrease of support for the energy wind. But so the one thing that pops up to me with this 2029 fixed date is, if people really go in hard on it, is there any concern that it's going to cost too much or something? I mean, from my perspective, I think to lead in the industry of the future actually has an net economic benefit, but still a lot high cost can ruffle some feathers, scare some people. So
the thing, yes, if Ukraine would see a hype like Germany has seen over the last 10 years, then I would be concerned on the cost. But as it is right now, I think it will still stay in a reasonable area. See, we have 51 gigawatt of electricity consumption in Ukraine. It will take a while to build that up on renewable.
Right.
So.
And they're sort of modulating that with the cuts in the rates.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The cut in the rate only applies for parks going online after the cut is effective. So, for example, parks which have been built in 2010 will receive the 46% until their 2029.
Yeah. And I also heard that there's now a much more attractive feed-in tariff for residential solar in Ukraine, starting in April 1st, I believe it was.
Yes, I need to check that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And so I was curious if it sounds like there hasn't been much residential. I think not much residential solar growth in Ukraine. Mostly this utility scale projects, but that this might stimulate a lot more residential growth. So I was curious if Activ Solar. I mean, there's definitely a big difference between residential developers and utility scale developers. But I'm wondering if you're thinking about moving into the residential field at all, since you have such a big presence in Ukraine.
We're not only thinking, we are actually doing.
Excellent.
And it's clearly in our roadmap, and we have, we're working on several projects, call it commercial rooftop. Currently we do not plan to go residential for the time being, but commercial, yes.
So the commercial to start with. And can you say much about that, or is that something again you have to...
In the range of up to 5.5 kilowatt.
Okay. And are you using any specific models for that as well? Like in the US, we have different major developers.
No, currently it's a straightforward model.
Straightforward.
Yep.